So, Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be the first world leader to address Ukrainian parliament since the Russian invasion, where he will invoke his idol Winston Churchill, apparently, and say that this is Ukraine's finest hour.
Yes, speaking virtually to MPs. He's also expected to set out the details of a £300 million military support package to the country.
Well, here to tell us more is Home and Security Editor Mark White, joining us alongside, in fact very close to, political correspondent Tom Harwood. So there we go, we've got the double whammy here.
This is a rare privilege for me, sandwiched between such beauty and youth. It's
wow.
incredible.
Gosh,
Makes me feel so very old and rather ugly.
No, we're saying it looks like the world's worst boy band, doesn't it? and our manager, who keeps forcing us out on stage no matter whether or not the public want him. But
Time you retired.
Exactly. Well, look, Mark, I suppose back to matters more serious. Boris Johnson is going to address the Ukrainian parliament. What kind of stuff are we expecting him to say? We're pledging some funds, I suppose, and some weapons.
Yes, I mean, as you say, it's meant to be an inspirational speech, of course, for the Ukrainian nation, to show them that the West, and in particular, of course, the UK, is firmly behind them. He is invoking Winston Churchill from World War II, and with the words, the finest hour, this is Ukraine's finest hour, and backing that up with yet more in the way of aid for Ukraine, including £300 million to pay for military equipment, and key to that will be some technology to help detect missiles and shell fire that's coming in that will enable the Ukrainians to track exactly where that shell fire and missiles, where they are coming from, with a view to then returning fire. So badly needed equipment, and an indication, I think, that despite the rhetoric from Russia, the belly aching from Putin and others, the West, it appears, is going to call his bluff, and they are determined to continue arming the Ukrainians.
But this has put us in the crosshairs somewhat, hasn't it? Because, if you believe Russian propaganda, which obviously we don't really, but they're talking about, even launching some kind of nuclear tidal wave into Britain that could send waters halfway up Scafell Pike. I mean, is this all just nonsense? Is there any chance that Putin might try and nuke us?
Well, I think the calculation is that it is just nonsense. It is threats, idle threats at the end of the day, because if Russia was to go down this path, then they would be risking a global world war, a nuclear war that would obliterate that nation. And however mad people think President Putin is, well, he's surrounded by lots of other people who you would think have a vested interest in ensuring that they stay alive and their loved ones stay alive. They have the kind of checks and balances that we have in the West as well. It is not just a matter of someone pressing their finger on the button and bringing nuclear Armageddon. So at the end of the day, the calculus, of course, is if you decide that you're going to acquiesce to those threats from Putin, then what do? You open the way for Putin in future. Any time he is involved in any kind of military activity, he's not getting his own way. He threatens nuclear annihilation, and the West backs down. And not just Putin, but, China, North Korea, so many other concerning governments around the world, as far as the West is concerned, that could adopt similar tactics if this particular tactic is successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, let's just go to, speaking of governments internationally, we know Boris Johnson will be the first international leader to actually address the Ukrainian parliament. He's incredibly popular in Ukraine, isn't he? Far more popular, I'd say, than he is at home at the moment. How is this going to play politically, him being the first one?
Yes, it's such an interesting situation. You couldn't ever imagine a street in the United Kingdom being renamed in honour of Boris Johnson, but that's what's happened in Ukraine in the last month. Indeed, there seems to be a personal friendship between the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and President Zelensky of Ukraine as well. This is stretching back through the UK's long support of Ukraine. Before this particular conflict, since 2015, the United Kingdom has been training the Ukrainian army, and indeed for many months leading up to this particular conflict, supplying weaponry, defensive weaponry, before any other European country decided to do so. So yes, this is a strong relationship between these two men and a very strong relationship between these two countries. We've seen a slight glimpse of what this speech may look like. There was a photo that may or may not have been supposed to be published on Twitter just in the last few minutes that showed the Ukrainian parliament with British flags flying in it. This seems to be an incredibly strong relationship. And I know that some people have brought up the timing of this speech, that we are just 2 days away from elections that are taking place in a number of council areas in England, in Northern Ireland, in Wales and in Scotland. But that does seem to be a bit of a low sort of political attack to being made. This is obviously an international situation that has been agreed between the Ukrainian parliament and the UK government. I dare say the Ukrainians would not be happy if the United Kingdom decided to delay any further support until after particular local elections.
Yeah, exactly. And just explain to us a bit about the logistics of this speech, because we can't go to it live, can we? Is it with the security concerns?
So there are some security concerns over the timing of this, over the location in which it's happening. We don't want to put a target on the back of lawmakers in Ukraine. We know that whilst Russia has withdrawn from Kiev, they still send missiles. We know that it is still an active war zone. Now, Boris Johnson is not physically in Ukraine for this speech. He's delivering it from number 9 Downing Street, the famous briefing room that we've come to know so well. He'll be standing there with a UK flag and a Ukrainian flag behind him, in much the same way that when President Zelensky addressed our parliament, he did that by video link as well. It's a sort of returning of that favour. But yes, we will be able to report what has been said and when it was said after the fact, but not beforehand.
Mark, just on the point there that Tom raised about the security concerns in Kiev, I mean, I've been quite surprised that there doesn't appear, anyway, on the face of it, to have been a more direct attempt on Zelensky's life by the Russians. Am I wrong about that? Have there been?
Well, certainly in the early days of the conflict, that was absolutely the thinking, that there were kill squads that were sent out, mercenaries and Russian special forces, with a view to taking out the Ukrainian leadership, and then hopefully that would bring about a very rapid fall in the country itself. Since then, whether that has changed to the point where if they got the chance of a clean shot at Zelensky, they wouldn't take it, I'm not so sure. This is why we have these very significant and special measures being taken. You will find that, you know, the Parliament will not give in advance when they're sitting, sometimes where they're sitting. We saw a press conference, for instance, just last month that was taking place in one of the rather splendid central subway stations in Kiev as well, with dozens of members of the press in there, that they moved on from that fairly quickly. So they are taking measures. They still think that President Zelensky and other officials within the Ukrainian government would be targeted. And indeed, of course, any political leaders going to that country. That's why it was particularly brave of Boris Johnson and now other political leaders who have taken that step to go into what is a conflict zone. And not just them. Just in recent days, our diplomatic missions, our embassy in Kiev has opened again, and others are opening their diplomatic missions as well. So a sign that they want to show that they're full square behind the Ukrainian people, that they're confident of returning and ensuring that government stays in power.
Yes, well, Mark White, Tom Harwood, thank you for joining us and giving us that update. We will, of course, update you on everything the Prime Minister says as and when we have it.
Yes, this was a very loving look that was exchanged between those two there. That was quite cute, actually. Yes, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us in the studio.